I thought it was just stress or getting older. I'd forget names, lose track of my keys, and sometimes feel completely blank when I was in the middle of a sentence. But then, something terrifying happened. Something I couldn't ignore. And that's when I realized these weren't just harmless slips. Today, I'm sharing the early signs of memory loss that I wish someone had told me about sooner, because catching them early can make all the difference. The day I realized something was off. I'll never forget the moment when the subtle signs of memory loss stopped being just an occasional annoyance and started to feel like something deeper, something more serious. I was sitting at my kitchen table one morning, sipping my coffee when I suddenly blanked out. Not just a quick "what was I doing" moment, but a complete chilling mental freeze. I had been writing a simple grocery list: milk, eggs, bread, but then I just stopped, pen hovering in midair, staring at the paper as though it had turned into a foreign language. I couldn't remember what I was supposed to write next, and first I brushed it off as stress. After all, I had been juggling work, family, and a busy schedule. I told myself it was just one of those days, a blip, nothing to worry about. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Over the past few months, I'd noticed small changes, moments where I couldn't recall a familiar name, or I'd walk into a room and forget why I was there. Still, I chalked it up to distraction or age, but this time felt different. There was a heaviness to the forgetfulness, as if my brain had just hit a brick wall. My heart raced as I sat there, pen in hand, and I felt a wave of anxiety crash over me. Was I losing my memory? Was this just the beginning of something worse? That morning haunted me. It replayed in my mind as I tried to go about my day, but I couldn't shake the fear. I started second-guessing everything. I'd pick up my phone to make a call and then realize I couldn't remember who I was calling. I'd open the fridge and forget what I needed. I'd reread emails multiple times because the information just wouldn't stick. The worst part wasn't just the forgetfulness. It was the doubt creeping in. I felt like I couldn't trust my own mind. Every time I stumbled over a word or misplaced something, a little voice whispered, "Is this the start of memory loss?" One night, while I was getting ready for bed, my spouse asked if I had taken my medication that morning. I froze. I genuinely couldn't remember. Not just a vague, "I think so," but a total blank. I had no recollection of the morning routine. It was as if the entire sequence had been erased. I felt a deep sense of panic. What if I'd been forgetting more than just names and grocery items? What if my brain was quietly slipping away from me? That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced through all the possibilities. Was it just normal aging? Was I overreacting? Or was this the beginning of something far more serious, like dementia or early onset, Alzheimer's? The next day, I decided to keep track of every moment where I felt my memory slip. I carried a small notebook in my pocket and wrote down each instance: a missed appointment, a forgotten name, a repeated story. As the days went on, the list grew longer than I expected, and that was when I realized something critical. These weren't isolated incidents. This wasn't just stress or distraction. It was a pattern, and it was happening more often than I wanted to admit. Looking back, I wish I hadn't dismissed those early signs for so long. I wish I'd recognized that even small memory slips can be the first red flags of something bigger. That morning at the kitchen table, with my grocery list and my forgotten thought, was my wake-up call. I know now that memory loss doesn't usually start with dramatic events like forgetting your own name or getting lost on the way home. It starts quietly: missed appointments, misplaced items, forgotten words. And the scariest part is how easy it is to brush those moments aside until they pile up into something undeniable. For me, that day was a turning point. It made me realize that I couldn't just ignore these signs and hope they'd go away. I had to take action, to understand what was happening to my brain, and to find ways to protect and strengthen my memory. I started reading everything I could about early memory loss, I learned that factors like poor diet, chronic stress, lack of sleep, and even dehydration can affect memory. I also discovered that early detection is key. The earlier you recognize the signs and take steps, the more likely you are to slow or even reverse the decline. That's why I'm sharing my story today, because I know I'm not alone. I know there are people out there who are experiencing these subtle signs and brushing them off, just like I did. And I want you to know, you're not crazy, you're not overreacting, and you're not alone. If you've ever found yourself standing in the kitchen wondering why you opened the fridge, or struggling to recall the name of a close friend, or even repeating stories to loved ones, you're not imagining things. These moments matter, and they deserve your attention. In the next sections, I'll share the subtle signs of memory loss you might be missing, the moment I knew I had to act, the practical steps I took to protect my brain, and finally, why it's crucial not to wait. But for now, remember this. The day I realized something was off was the day I took back control of my memory. And you can too. It's not just forgetfulness. The subtle clues I missed. After that unforgettable morning with my grocery list, I began paying closer attention. What I discovered over the following weeks was honestly shocking and a little scary. I realized I'd been missing the early signs of memory decline for months, maybe even longer. The most eye-opening part? These signs didn't feel like what I thought memory loss was supposed to look like. They were subtle. So subtle, in fact, that they were easy to dismiss or explain away. But once I noticed the pattern, everything started clicking into place. Let me tell you exactly what I began to observe. Maybe you'll recognize some of these signs in your own life, too. 1. I started repeating myself and didn't realize it. One day, while chatting with a close friend over coffee, she gently laughed and said, "You told me that story last week." I paused. Did I? I genuinely couldn't remember sharing it. It happened again with my spouse. I mentioned something I read in an article, and they gave me a strange look. "You told me this yesterday." That's when the realization hit me. I was repeating stories, and I had no memory of it. Not just once or twice, but regularly. I used to brush this off when others did it. Oh, they're just chatty or forgetful. But now, I was the one doing it, and it didn't feel normal anymore. 2. Missed appointments and confusion with dates. I've always been organized, the kind of person who never missed a dentist appointment or forgot birthdays. But suddenly, I was slipping. I missed a scheduled checkup, not because I was too busy, but because I completely forgot it was happening. Then came the confusion. I would mix up dates. I'd write something on the calendar and later wonder why it was there. I began second-guessing myself constantly. Did I already pay that bill? Was that meeting on Wednesday or Thursday? It's one thing to forget where you put your keys, but when your sense of time starts getting fuzzy, that's a whole new level of disorientation. 3. Trouble finding the right words. Here's something that truly unnerved me. I'd be mid-sentence in a conversation and completely blank on a common word. For example, I was trying to describe a bookshelf, and I said, "You know, that thing where we keep the paper things, books." I laughed it off, pretending I was just tired. But inside, I felt a pang of fear. This wasn't like me. Word-finding difficulties are one of those subtle memory changes that don't always get talked about. But they're real, and they can be early signs of cognitive strain. It didn't happen every day, but often enough to shake my confidence. 4. Walking into a room and forgetting. Why, we've all had those moments. You walk into a room and suddenly forget why you're there. It's common, but for me, it began happening a lot. I'd walk into the kitchen, stand there blankly, then walk back out without doing anything. Or I'd open a drawer and have no idea what I was looking for. At first, I blamed distraction. Oh, I've just got too much on my mind. But when these moments kept happening multiple times a day, I knew it was more than distraction. Something wasn't right. 5. Losing focus. While reading, I used to love reading books. I could sit for hours, getting lost in a story. But over time, I noticed that I couldn't retain what I had just read. I'd finish a page, and moments later realize I had no idea what I just read. I had to go back and reread entire sections. My concentration was slipping, and this wasn't just about reading. It spilled over into watching TV, holding conversations, even writing emails. My brain felt foggy. I couldn't stay fully present. 6. People noticing. Before I did, perhaps the most painful realization came when others started noticing the changes before I even fully did. My family would sometimes finish my sentences. My coworkers would gently remind me of things I'd already been told. At first, I felt embarrassed, defensive even. But then I realized they weren't being critical. They were worried. And that was the moment I knew I had to stop ignoring these signs. Memory loss isn't always obvious. Here's the thing no one tells you. Memory loss doesn't begin with dramatic forgetfulness. It sneaks in slowly, quietly. You don't just wake up one day and forget who you are. It begins with little moments, missed details, word slips, mental blanks, and before you know it, those moments start forming a pattern. And the scary part is how easy it is to normalize those patterns. We laugh them off. We say, "Oh, I'm just getting older." But age alone doesn't explain it. Not when your brain starts changing in ways that interfere with your life. Trust your instincts. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my gut sooner. I knew something felt off, but I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to face the possibility that something serious might be going on. But I've learned that denial can be dangerous. The earlier we recognize and respond to these signs, the better our chances of doing something about them. Whether it's making lifestyle changes, seeking medical advice, or simply becoming more mindful, we have the power to take control, but only if we pay attention. Coming up, next. In the next section, I'll take you to the moment when things became impossible to ignore. The moment that made me say, "This isn't just a bad day. I need to take action." It's one of the hardest stories for me to tell, but it's also the most important one, because sometimes it takes hitting a wall before we decide to do something about it, and I want to help you get there before it's too late. The moment I knew I had to act. There's always a moment, the one that makes you stop, drop the excuses, and realize something has to change. For me, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had been feeling off for months, brushing off the forgetfulness, the repeated stories, the mental fog. I told myself it was stress, aging, lack of sleep, but denial can only hold up for so long. That day, I was supposed to pick up my granddaughter from her piano lesson. I had written it down on the calendar. I had even mentioned it to my spouse the night before. But somehow, that afternoon, it slipped from my mind. Completely. I was sitting at home reading a magazine, sipping tea, when my phone rang. It was my daughter. She was frantic. "Mom, where are you? Lily's been waiting outside for 30 minutes. Are you okay?" My heart dropped. I felt a wave of nausea and panic. I had completely forgotten. Not just, "Oh, I'm running late," but total, absolute oblivion. I had no memory of the plan, the promise I'd made to my granddaughter. I rushed out the door, my mind spinning. The guilt hit me harder than I could have imagined. My granddaughter was standing outside the music school, looking cold and confused. When I pulled up, she tried to smile, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Are you okay, Grandma?" she asked softly. I nodded, but inside I was screaming at myself. How could I have forgotten something so important? This wasn't just about forgetting a grocery item or misplacing my keys. This was about forgetting people I loved and promises I'd made. That night, I sat down and wrote everything I could remember about the past few months. The missed appointments, the forgotten conversations, the moments when my brain just seemed to stop working. I filled pages with my observations. And as I wrote, the pattern became undeniable. I was experiencing early signs of memory loss. The turning point, that incident with my granddaughter, wasn't just a moment of forgetfulness. It was a turning point. It was the day I realized that if I didn't act now, things were going to get worse. I couldn't keep pretending that stress or age was to blame. I needed to take responsibility and figure out what was going on. I needed answers. So the next morning I made an appointment with my doctor. I felt nervous, embarrassed even. Would they dismiss me? Would they tell me I was overreacting? But I knew I had to try. When I explained my symptoms to my doctor, repeated stories, forgotten appointments, lost words, they listened carefully. They asked questions about my health, my lifestyle, my sleep, my stress levels. Then they ordered some basic tests to rule out medical causes like vitamin deficiencies, thyroid issues, or medication side effects. And here's something I learned. Not all memory loss is due to dementia. Sometimes it's reversible. Stress, dehydration, poor nutrition, sleep deprivation, even certain medications can mimic memory problems. But catching these issues early is crucial. Facing the fear, I won't lie, sitting in that doctor's office waiting for answers was terrifying. I kept thinking, what if this is dementia? What if I'm losing myself? But I also knew that ignoring it wasn't an option. If there was a chance I could improve, I had to try. If this was reversible, I wanted to know. And if it wasn't, I wanted to plan and prepare while I still could. That was the moment I shifted from fear to action. The memory journal, one of the first steps I took was starting a memory journal. I began writing down every instance of forgetfulness. What happened, when, and how it made me feel. Over time, patterns emerged. I noticed that my memory lapses were worse when I was tired, stressed, or hadn't eaten well. I also realized that regular exercise and hydration helped me feel more mentally sharp. This journal became my roadmap. It showed me what made things better and what made them worse. Small changes, big impact after my appointment. I began making small changes. I focused on getting better sleep, reducing stress, and eating a more brain-friendly diet. I added short walks to my daily routine. I stayed hydrated. It wasn't a magic cure, but slowly, I noticed a difference. The fog lifted a little. I felt more focused. I still had occasional lapses, but they weren't as severe. Most importantly, I felt empowered. Instead of being a victim of my memory loss, I was taking control. The wake-up call, I needed looking back. That moment with my granddaughter was painful, but it was also a gift. It woke me up. It forced me to stop ignoring the signs and start doing something about them. If I hadn't acted then, who knows where I'd be now. That's why I'm sharing this story. Because maybe you've been experiencing similar moments, little lapses you've brushed off. Maybe you've felt the creeping doubt, the fear of what it might mean. I'm here to tell you, don't wait. Coming up next. In the next section, I'll reveal the specific steps I took to protect and strengthen my brain, the changes that helped me regain control and feel more like myself again. These aren't complicated medical treatments. They're simple, powerful. Habits anyone can start today. You don't have to wait for a wake-up call like I did. You can start making changes now, before it's too late. What I did next to protect my brain. After that wake-up call with my granddaughter and the long, honest conversation with my doctor, I realized something. If I wanted to protect my brain, I couldn't wait for someone else to fix it. I had to take ownership of my health and make real changes. At first, I felt overwhelmed. There was so much information out there about memory loss, brain health, and aging. It seemed like everyone had a different opinion, But as I dug deeper, I discovered that there are a few core habits that almost every expert agrees on. And these habits aren't just for people with memory problems. They're for anyone who wants to keep their mind sharp as they age. So, I started with the basics. 1. I cleaned up. My diet, I'll be honest. I wasn't eating terribly before, but I wasn't exactly eating for brain health either. I loved my morning pastries, my salty snacks in the afternoon, and my occasional fast food when I was in a hurry. But I learned that certain foods, especially processed carbs, sugars, and unhealthy fats, can contribute to brain fog and even accelerate cognitive decline. I started by adding more whole, brain-boosting foods to my meals, leafy greens like spinach and kale, packed with folate and antioxidants. Berries, especially blueberries, loaded with flavonoids that protect neurons. Fatty fish like salmon and mackerel, rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Nuts and seeds for healthy fats and vitamin E. Whole grains to stabilize blood sugar and provide steady energy. I didn't cut out everything I loved, but I focused on balance. I also reduced my intake of processed foods, sugar, and excessive alcohol, since too much alcohol is linked to brain shrinkage over time. 2. I got moving exercise. Had always been something I told myself I'd get around to, but now I made it a priority. I learned that regular physical activity doesn't just help your body, it also boosts blood flow to the brain, encourages the growth of new brain cells, and reduces the risk of cognitive decline. I started small. 20-30-minute walks most days of the week. I'd walk around the neighborhood, listen to a podcast, or just enjoy the fresh air. Gradually, I added light strength training and simple stretches. Within weeks, I noticed a difference. I felt more alert, my sleep improved, and I even felt less stressed. 3. I learned to manage. Stress for years. I had brushed off stress as a normal part of life. But chronic stress floods the body with cortisol, which can actually damage brain cells over time. I realized I needed to create space to relax and reset my mind. I experimented with different techniques, deep breathing, meditation, and even just sitting quietly with a cup of tea. I found that even 5 minutes of mindfulness each day helped me feel calmer and more focused. 4. I challenged my brain before. I had fallen into the habit of zoning out in front of the TV or scrolling endlessly on my phone. But the brain is like a muscle. It needs exercise to stay strong. I started reading more, playing word games, doing crossword puzzles, and even trying my hand at learning a new language. It wasn't about becoming a genius overnight. It was about keeping my mind active and engaged. These little mental workouts made me feel sharper and more confident. 5. I prioritized sleep. I used to think sleep was optional, something I could cut short to get more done, but I learned that deep restorative sleep is essential for brain health. During sleep, the brain clears out toxins and consolidates memories. I started setting a regular bedtime, turning off screens an hour before sleep, and creating a relaxing nighttime routine. Gradually, I began waking up feeling refreshed and mentally clearer. 6. I stayed hydrated. This might sound simple, but I wasn't drinking enough water. Dehydration, even mild, can cause brain fog and fatigue. I began keeping a water bottle nearby and made sure to sip throughout the day. It made a noticeable difference in my energy and focus. 7. I reconnected with loved ones. Memory loss and cognitive changes can make you want to withdraw, but isolation only makes things worse. I made a conscious effort to stay connected with family and friends. I joined a local community group called Friends for Coffee and spent more time with my grandchildren. These connections weren't just emotionally rewarding, they were mentally stimulating too. Conversations, laughter, and shared experiences all gave my brain a healthy workout. The key: consistency. I'll admit it wasn't easy to overhaul my habits overnight. There were days I wanted to skip the walk, indulge in junk food, or stay up too late. But I kept reminding myself why I was doing this. I wasn't just making changes for today, I was investing in my future self. With time, these small steps became second nature. I felt more in control, more hopeful, and more confident in my ability to protect my mind. A new beginning. What started as a terrifying realization became a turning point. By taking action, cleaning up my diet, exercising, managing stress, challenging my mind, sleeping better, staying hydrated, and reconnecting with loved ones, I felt like I was reclaiming my life. I wasn't cured. I still had moments of forgetfulness. But I was no longer passive. I was proactive. I was giving my brain the best possible chance to stay healthy and sharp. And that's what I want for you too. Coming up next. In the final section, I'll share why you can't afford to wait, the long-term risks of ignoring the signs, and how early action can change everything. This isn't just about memory loss. It's about your independence, your quality of life, and your future. Don't wait for a wake-up call. Let me show you why. Why you can't afford to wait. If you've been following my story so far, you know this isn't just about me forgetting where I put my car keys. It's about facing the creeping shadow of memory loss, the tiny cracks in the mind that can, over time, widen into chasms. When I finally admitted to myself that something was wrong, I was scared, but I was also determined to fight back. The wake-up call with my granddaughter was painful, but it gave me a gift, the chance to act early. Now I need you to hear me loud and clear. You can't afford to wait. Time is not on our side. I used to think memory loss was just something that happened naturally with age, like gray hair or wrinkles. But what I've learned is this. While aging is inevitable, how we age is up to us. The brain doesn't suddenly break down overnight. Problems with memory and cognition often build up slowly, over years or even decades. By the time noticeable symptoms appear, the damage has already begun. That's why early detection and intervention are so critical. When we wait, telling ourselves, it's probably just stress, or I'm too busy to deal with this right now, we lose precious time. Time that could be used to slow or even reverse the progression. The long-term risks of ignoring the signs. Let me be brutally honest. Ignoring those subtle memory slips, those moments of confusion, can lead to much more than occasional embarrassment. Progressive cognitive decline. What starts as mild forgetfulness can evolve into mild cognitive impairment, MCI, and from there into full-blown dementia. Alzheimer's disease, in particular, can develop silently for years before showing severe symptoms. Loss of independence. Memory problems can rob you of the ability to manage your finances, take medications properly, drive safely, or even live alone. I've seen friends lose their freedom because they ignored the signs for too long. Emotional toll. As memory declines, anxiety and depression often increase. You start to doubt yourself. Relationships suffer. You pull away from family and friends. Increased risk of physical health issues. Cognitive decline is linked to higher risks of falls, injuries, and hospitalizations. It's not just the mind that's affected. The body suffers too. The myth of "I'll wait until it gets worse." I've heard it over and over from friends and even from myself. I'll wait until it gets worse, then I'll see a doctor. But here's the hard truth. By the time it gets worse, it's often too late. Treatments that might have helped earlier may no longer be effective. And you'll have missed the chance to implement simple lifestyle changes, like I did, that can slow the progression and improve quality of life. The power of early action, the changes I made, cleaning up my diet, exercising, managing stress, challenging my mind, and reconnecting with loved ones weren't magic bullets, but they gave my brain a fighting chance. They created an environment where my mind could heal, adapt, and stay sharp. Here's what early action can give you. Time to adapt to changes and plan for the future. Access to treatments that work better in the early stages. A sense of control, reducing fear and anxiety. A healthier brain overall, with benefits that ripple through the entire body. Knowledge is power. One of the biggest barriers to early action is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of a diagnosis, fear of change. But knowledge is power. By learning the early signs of memory loss and being honest with ourselves, we can make informed decisions. I used to think that a diagnosis of memory problems would mean the end of my independence. But what I've learned is that it's not the diagnosis that takes away your freedom. It's the denial. When you face the problem head-on, you give yourself the best possible chance to stay independent for as long as possible. Don't do it alone. If you're feeling overwhelmed, don't be afraid to reach out for help. Talk to your doctor, your family, and your friends. Share your concerns. There are memory clinics, support groups, and resources that can guide you. I was surprised at how supportive my loved ones were when I finally opened up about my fears. Instead of judging me, they stood by me, offering encouragement and understanding. The cost of waiting. I've heard too many stories of people who ignored the signs, thinking they could handle it alone. They waited too long, and by the time they sought help, the damage was done. Their quality of life suffered, their relationships strained, their independence vanished. That's not the future I want for myself, or for you. This is your wake-up. Call if you've been brushing off the signs, forgetting appointments, repeating stories, struggling to find words. This is your wake-up call. It's not about fear, it's about empowerment. You have the power to take control of your brain health. You have the ability to make changes that can improve your life today and protect your mind for the future. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait for the memory lapses to get so bad that you can't ignore them anymore. Act now. What's next? This journey isn't over. It's just beginning. I've shared my story, my wake-up call, and the steps I've taken to protect my brain. Now it's your turn. Start by being honest with yourself about any memory concerns, making an appointment with your doctor, adopting brain-healthy habits, diet, exercise, stress management, sleep, staying connected with loved ones, keeping your mind active and engaged, and most importantly, don't wait. Wrapping it up, this is the end of our story for now, but it's really just the beginning of your journey. I hope you felt inspired, informed, and empowered. If my story has resonated with you, please consider sharing this video with someone you care about. Together, we can break the silence around memory loss and take action before it's too late.